Yeah, I believe in I don't believe in lucky sevens. I'm not sure about Loch Ness, but I know I believe in angels. I believe in happiness.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here on the Caffeinated Cooper Show. I'm back, and I feel so much better. I didn't realize that a cubital tunnel release and a carpal tunnel release together on the same arm is going to put you on an arm cast, but it did. And we are here. We're back with the news. So let's talk about some stuff because there's a lot of stuff going on. So I have JC Schweingrouber with us this afternoon, and he is with Vista Front Partners. How are you, JC?
I'm great. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. It's a weekend. The hours are different, but we made it.
Right. That's what I was about to say. Time changed. And I still got a full night's sleep, but I'm like, somebody bring me a blanket and a pillow. I'm just knocked out.
Oh, I'm the same way. I thought about putting on tinted glasses. I have prescription sunglasses. I thought about putting them on because, well, I'm all raccoon-eyed up this morning. It's, yeah. Sleep was elusive a little bit last night, and then losing an hour wasn't great either.
So we were talking about something in the green room, and I want to start off with it because, we're getting older, or I am getting older. You still look 24, maybe?
Hey, thank you. Biggest bird all day.
And
watch the news.
Yeah, we do watch the news. We watch, that's so weird. It's like as soon as I crossed over into the 40s, into 4D, really, I'm like, I don't think I want to watch Impractical Jokers. How about the news? Like, what is that?
It's like Impractical Jokers, but with bigger mistakes.
Yeah.
It's Impractical Jokers, but they're using your money.
Well, that's true.
So the joke's on us at that point. It's like, hell, I haven't watched news in 20 years since I got out of college, and this is what I've been paying for? Are you kidding me?
Oh, it seems like it's just so absurd. It's just like, wait, what? What's going on?
Total comedy of the absurd. Yeah, and getting older, it's like all these things happen, It's like you had your surgery. By the way, did you get to show everybody the cute arm mitten, as I called it? I was like, did you put your mitten on or something? I'm like, mittens? Who says that? But anyway, this is cool.
I got pretty frustrated with it because I've been really lucky. I've never broken anything or sprained it so much that I had to have a cast on for a long duration. So this was my very first experience with like a cast, and it was only a half cast. So it could breathe up my arm, because it was mainly just the cottony type material. And then the backside was a stiff, hard cast, and it's wrapped on there like a billion times. So your arm is huge. You can't move it. And I was getting really creative because I was good after a week, and I'm like, okay, this is not too bad. And I'm like smelling it. I'm like, it smells good. It smells like a hospital. I'm like,
breeze.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, we're good. No. By the time day 9 hit, I was done. And I'm like unwrapping it, and then I rewrap it. And I did that a couple of times. And thankfully I didn't take it off, but I had no clue. Like I figured maybe they just wrap my hand a little bit and wrap my elbow a little bit. But no, of course I was totally out of it the day of surgery. So reality didn't hit me until I woke up the next day. And I'm like, this is a cast. What in the world? Why am I in a cast for my fingers? Oh, what am I going to do with this? And I had even asked the girl, can I go running? And she's like, no, it's just 2 weeks. You'll be okay.
Did you say anything during surgery, like when they were putting you under, that you remember you were told later, like funny stuff you said?
I can remember some of the surgeries. When they went in to do my hip, I remember that. And there was, she's like how do you call it? The surgeon has basically like an understudy. So she was the understudy for my surgeon, and she
Yeah.
had this long, thick red hair. And I remember looking up at her and I'm like, your hair is so pretty. And then I was out. But this time they wanted to intubate me. So the last thing I remember, he deadened the nerves. So he gave me a shot like right here. And that will just knock out your whole arm. It's like an epidural, basically. And that was he's like, okay, it's gonna go really fast. They put the thing on my face and I was out. I don't remember even being in the OR.
Wow. I can't believe I'm about to tell you guys this. And we're doing it on your show for everyone to listen. But this is so funny. When I broke my arm and I had to go in for surgery like a couple of weeks later, when they were giving me like the stuff to kind of sort of knock me out, I remember laying in the prep room. This nurse was asking me questions, and I'm just looking around. I could tell none of these people wanted to be there. I could tell they hated their jobs. Like they spent more time hanging around, like complaining to each other about life.
Mm-hmm.
And then okay, we go back and ask this half dead guy over here a couple more questions. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm sitting there thinking, I hope surgery's not anytime soon because I'm still awake. Like, why am I still awake? So they're wheeling me down to this thing. And the drugs are starting to kick in a little bit, And they wheel me into the operating room. And I remember just laying, they put me on one table and put me on the other. And I remember looking up at the lights. I'm like, man, this is like something out of a 70s sci-fi movie. I said that. And he goes, we're a little more modern than that. The assistant surgeon said I'd recognized him before from appointments. And then here come my doctor. And then this lady leans over me and she has this bandana on. And she kind of looks like this cool biker chick, but really hot. And I look up at her. And apparently I don't remember any of this stuff. But apparently I kind of like raised my eyebrows at her. And I said, you look quite fetching. How are you? Like I was trying to hit on her or something, but I'm not good at it. The doctor laughed, apparently. He looked over and goes, that's my wife. She was in there like to assist in the surgery. She worked there too. I had no clue. And I don't remember any of this, but they were laughing their asses off about it when they told me later. I'm like, really? Okay.
Wow, that's my wife. You think she really was his wife, or were they just messing with you?
Oh, no, they told me when I was like alert later on that was his wife. And I'm like, sorry, dude.
Wow.
You hate to pick her up,
Oh my goodness, that is hilarious.
But I said that. I'm like, I said that? He goes, yeah, you were talking about some weird sci-fi movie in the operating room looking like it was way outdated. I'm like, I did? And I remember the guy saying something like, take a couple of deep breaths and you'll be out. And I'm awake. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I had like one deep breath and I was gone.
Uh-huh.
And it was supposed to be a day surgery, so I was supposed to wake up after and go home. I didn't wake up till like 10:30 that night in the hospital.
How long did surgery take? Did it like go way over or something?
I was late getting surgery because they had a gunshot victim come in. He had to go help. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just lay here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just wait my turn. But yeah, couldn't believe I did that. And then, but I woke up. I'm like, where am I? Should I be home? And it's like, dude, we couldn't wake you up. You just kept sleeping. I'm like, man, that must have been some good stuff you gave me. I don't know. But it was a beast to wake me up. So I had to stay overnight and go home the next day.
Oh my goodness. And it was a pretty severe break, huh?
Yes, I broke my arm in 7 places because I'm getting older. That's what we were talking about. I'm getting older. Like I'd wake up one morning, I'm like grabbing my gut and shaking it. I'm like, all right, fat boy, let's go down to the park. It's like 7:30. Go shoot some basketball. Nobody will be down there. You don't have to feel self-conscious. Start getting in shape a little bit. Move your ass. So I go down there and I'm shooting hoops and the ball bounces off the rim. And I guess whatever reason, I'm going for a loose ball foul. The mind is willing, but the body wasn't able. And I fell and I put my hand out to brace myself and broke my left arm in 7 places. So now when I go to the airport, I light up the systems. If I walk into a courthouse, they have to scan me because I set the alarm off.
Oh my gosh. So there's a plate. We were talking earlier. You said there's a plate on the top side.
I don't know if anybody can see this, but I've got a nasty scar. Looks like I tried to commit suicide the right way, actually, is what it looks like. But that's not what it was. A doctor did that.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got a plate in here and like 9 screws, and I had to I guess where I broke the bones in my wrist. One of the little bones was like still floating around. They couldn't get out, so it's in there somewhere, like a little chip. And a hairline fracture in my elbow that's still not. You can still feel the knot.
Were you playing alone?
I sure was.
Oh gosh!
How do
You
you
should
break?
have said no. It was a pig pile.
I was by myself. I wish I had a better excuse for an injury like that. Like, yeah, I was playing rugby with the Irish professional team, in a pickup game, and you know, got
Yeah,
run over by some brute. But no, no.
yeah. Rugby's pretty. That's a pretty tough sport. Pretty
Yeah,
rough sport.
excuse for breaking my arm other than like being overly zealous with a big gut. It's like you get older and things happen. I was
You
telling
do.
you, this is the age where like you change a light bulb, you get in the hospital. If you fall and break a hip.
I know. I'm constantly, and now all of a sudden I'm going back in my head of all the times my kids have looked at me going, "Mom, you're crazy." I'm constantly like, "Oh no, we got to move this because like this is a trip hazard. Somebody could fall on this, or the rug is folded over. You got to make sure it's flat. Is somebody could trip on it?" And I'm like, "That's because I know if I trip, like I'm getting hurt." You know,
See,
and the kids are like, "Whatever, you just tuck and roll."
I mean, you're in the movies and like you love movies. Like after the age of 40, and I could be wrong here, but like that movie Final Destination ought to be required viewing every year because like okay, I'm finding 10 different ways I can die this year if I'm not careful.
Yeah, you're right.
I thought about that like a couple of months ago. I was driving up to my office in Frankfurt, and
Yeah.
I was on the Parkway, and I get behind this big logging truck. I'm like, whoa, not today, Satan. I've seen this movie. Oh, sir, we're hauling ass around that guy.
I do the same thing because we have a lot of construction vehicles, a lot of small companies, just two-man, group. And they will put things in the bed of their truck and like strap it together, but not strap it down to the bed of the truck. And I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
going around.
What's up with that? People that like strap stuff down with like 3 bungee cords and a couple of rubber bands. That's not going to work.
No, it's not. Hey, do you remember learning how to drive?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
my daughter is learning how to drive. So we've already gone through 2 drivers. The first driver, the oldest out of the pack, right? So we can apply some birth order there. Very responsible, drove at the speed limit, maybe 5 miles over. Like she was really confident and comfortable. Great driver. The next one down, very timid. She would be on a 45-mile-per-hour road driving 30. So we'd have to like push her to go faster.
yeah.
Very timid. The third girl. This girl is the first one I've had to yell, "Stop!" She's coming up to a red light. She's so paranoid that somebody's going to rear end her that she doesn't want to stop. We stopped beyond the crosswalk 3 times. And I'm like,
Hey,
I can't.
and if people are interested in following her today, she'll be in the NASCAR race later on this afternoon.
Yeah, she has no problem going fast and she doesn't like to stop. I'm like, what is this?
Born race driver.
Yeah, born race car driver is right. And now that will finish up all my girls. Now I get to go into the boys, and I am scared to death. I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah. I remember I was a pretty good driver, actually. It's so weird because I got to learn the hard way, so to speak. My dad had cancer at the time. Now he survived, right? So not a sad story, but we had to drive. He was being treated in Johnson City, Tennessee, and we lived in this little town where I'm at, Richlands, and it was an hour and 45-minute drive down to the hospital. And we were doing that 3 days a week. And they kept my dad while they were doing certain treatments and surgeries and stuff. So my mother was so exhausted. I had my learner's permit. And I'm like, I'll just drive. And then she would doze off and I wouldn't wake her up. And I was learning how to drive while she was asleep. And I don't think she remembers some of that, but it's like, anyway, but that was my learning to drive on 4 lanes in traffic. Now I taught my niece how to drive. And she scared me to death. I thought she was going to kill me. So I let her drive my Envoy, and we're driving. I'm saying, okay, today we're going to go from where we're at here. We're going to go up we did like little driving around here to get her used to it. And then I said, okay, we're going to the next town over because you're going to drive me over to this little restaurant called Pal's. We're going to go through the drive-through and you're going to buy me a hot dog. How about that? She's like, I would love to. And I'll buy you a peach tea. I'm like, let's do that. So we're on the 4-lane and she's one of those, like your daughter that's doing 45 and a 55 or 35 and a 55. I said, just do what you're comfortable doing. Ease up a little bit. And then there was a situation where somebody was riding her bumper so hard it was making her nervous. Mm-hmm. And then there was a truck coming, like a 18-wheeler. So she gets in front of this car to pass. I said, Nicole, you better hit your gas or we're going to get hit by this truck. So she hits the gas and gets around this guy, freaking out the whole time. Her eyes are bugged out. She thinks to give the signal and get back in the lane because this truck is literally like almost in our backseat. And what does she do? And she gets back in the lane, hits her brakes. I'm like, this other person almost nailed us. Like, I thought we were dead. Like, and she was like, she got to Pals. And of course, I'm trying to act like Mr. Cool, like nothing ever, like water off my back, right? I said, and she drives through and she gets in. There's nowhere to go inside to eat, it's just a drive through. So we sit in the parking lot and we eat. She goes, okay, let's go. Can you drive home? I'm like, no, I can't drive home. I said, you already went through the hardest part about killing us. You're going to drive us the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. Like, can I stop and go to the bathroom first? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. So anyway, it was so funny, but that was like a learning experience. But now she drives back and forth from Lynchburg, which is outside of Roanoke, all the way back here. It's like 4-hour drive.
Wow.
Works and went to grad school and all that. So she's used to all the highway driving now, but she got used to it the hard way. So.
Yeah, I kind of threw my daughter into that 2 weeks ago. So the day after I had surgery, that morning, the day after, she had to go to an orthopedic specialist for her hip because she dances. And she was doing this crazy pose. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but basically you have one foot planted and the other foot is completely perpendicular. But the way to do that, you kind of have to almost turn it in its hip joint to get the foot to stand straight. And so she heard a pop, and then all of a sudden she had a loss of range of movement of it, so that she could never quite get her legs straight up again. And she said, Mom, it hurt, So I'm like, okay. So we have finally this appointment that took 3.5 weeks to get into for her hip specialist. And I'm like, sweetie, I can't drive. Like, I just came out of surgery. You're going to have to drive. And so she had to go on the highway. She had to go. And she was just kind of thrown into it. The highway, I was slightly concerned. I never told my husband about it because he would be like, you're an idiot. She wasn't ready to go on the highway. But I had faith in her, right? And I also had post-op drugs in me, so I couldn't drive. And we had to get somewhere. And she's merging onto the highway. And she's continuing in the merge lane, where it turns into just the gutter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sweetie, we got to get over. Like, let's move over. I really, this close from grabbing the wheel, but I couldn't grab the wheel and the brakes at the same time. So I'm like, just keep my hands to myself. She made it. She got off the highway. And this is where she didn't stop. So she gets off the highway and you have to merge into traffic for it's like a state highway that you have to get onto to get to our town. So she's merging over to the state highway. She did that. And then the light turns amber and we're still moving. I'm like, okay, you need to slow down. You got to stop. Stop. So I'm sitting there going, stop. What does she do? And I'm like, what are you looking for? Just put your foot down. Stop. So I'm not doing that one again.
If her answer was, I'm looking for the cops, like then you probably might want to rethink the strategy of the driving.
I know. And all these kids, the answer is like, you have to stop. What up here is telling you, look around you. Take a survey of this. Like, were you planning on going through the intersection? What was your plan here?
The cops aren't there to catch you, then it didn't count. I don't know. That's so funny though. But yeah, Yeah, learning to drive. I'm glad I don't learn to drive today, but
Oh,
yeah, fun experiences. But yeah, my first trip, I got my driver's license, and me and two friends went to a Kiss concert. Got pulled over that night. It was great. I'll tell you that.
no.
Oh, it was funny. It was yeah. Every time I get in trouble, it's like something out of a Three Stooges show. It's like, what'd you do? Yeah, it's like,
You open the can of worms. You've got to tell us now.
so we go to this Kiss concert, having a great time. I'm 16. I'm driving, like, and I literally just turned 16, like 2 days before, and had my driver's license. So my sister was nice enough to let me borrow her car. She always let me borrow her car. Like, Melinda was the nicest person. Like, yeah, borrow it. Try not to kill it, but and it's a wonder I didn't kill it that night. It was close. So I'm coming out of Johnson City, Tennessee. It's like an hour and 45-minute drive, right? And my friend Frank is in the front seat, and my friend Brandon is in the back. And I'm driving my sister's little Dodge Charger, this piece of crap. So I'm driving as we come out the road. It's 2-lane. It used to be, right? It's 2-lane, and then it goes into a 4-lane. It's so foggy. I'm just trying to follow the line at the edge of the road so I don't go off the road. And apparently I go into the turning lane and didn't realize that doing 55 miles an hour, I went airborne into the median. Boom. And I bounced right back up on the road. How I didn't tear the car up, I have no idea. So anyway, back up on the road. Everybody's like, what the hell was that? So I'm like, nothing. So I'm driving. And as I get back to Bristol, which is the next town over, I'm on the 4-lane, getting ready to exit off in this little town called Abingdon and get on my road head home, where I'm more comfortable driving, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so foggy. So foggy. You cannot see far in front of you. To this day, I've never seen fog that bad. So this car gets right on my bumper. And I'm like, what is this guy's problem? And Frank goes, well, there's 3 of us and only one of him. If he's trying to start something, because I was doing it was 65. I was doing probably 40, 45. Fog was so thick. So I said, let's piss this guy off. I start weaving back and forth in the lane. No one else is on the highway. Just me and this idiot behind me. Until that idiot turned his cop car lights on. And it pulls me over. At the ripe age of 16, I'm driving the car that's not mine. It belongs to my sister. And he walks up, and I'm like, I'm scared to death. Like, I know I'm dead. I get home and tell my parents I'm never driving again until I'm 21. And Melinda will laugh, but that's the only solace I got from this. Melinda will think it's funny if they don't impound her car. So I'm gonna lie to this guy. I was like, all right, Frank said, we've been to a church meeting. I'm like, yeah, it works. I roll the window down and he goes, license and registration. I hand it to him. I said, and I just said, there you go. And he said, where you been? And my buddy from the back seat goes, we just left a Kiss concert, man. And I'm like, shut the F up. You guys been drinking or doing any drugs? You smoking weed? I'm like, no. And Brandon's so nervous. He's like, no, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Anyway, the guy didn't give me a ticket. As weird as he's like, what are you doing now? Like I said, it's so foggy I can't see. And we thought you were some guy messing with us. I'm just rattling on the truth. He goes, I actually believe you. He gave me my license back. And he goes, where are you going? I told him. I said, I'm used to driving on those roads. This is the first time I've ever driven downtown on my own. He's like, all right, here's the exit. You're like a mile from your exit. Take your exit. Go home. Go straight home, fellas. Be safe. I don't want to hear about you dead tomorrow somewhere. I'm like, okay, great. Thank you. And that was it. It's like, but the fact that we called him ma'am and not sir, and I'm about to lie to the guy, and I'm like pissing him off on the road, weaving back and forth like a drunk. Like, I don't know how he didn't pull me out of the car and beat me. I probably had that coming,
And he didn't ask you whose car it was, or I guess at that time they could.
Yeah, car belonged to. I was like, my sister let me borrow it. It's my first trip out of town. He's like, oh my God. Like he was probably thinking, like, man, I've been there. I've probably done the same thing. I'm gonna let this kid go. But yeah, that was my first of many brushes with the law on the highway. I ended up having at one point, I've had 12 tickets That was before I even moved to Cincinnati. That was.
For what? 12 tickets.
I have a heavy foot. I have to set my cruise everywhere I go.
Oh.
Like, yeah, I'll be doing 90 before I know it. I'm like, oh, it's only 65. I should probably slow down.
12 tickets. That's a lot. I thought I had a lot of tickets. I mean, I haven't had a ticket in a very long time. It seems like once I became a mom and there was more than one life in that car, I drove totally differently, less aggressive, slowed down, all that kind of stuff. But I did get one ticket. This was the last ticket I got. Had to have been 5 or 6 years ago. At least. Now I had all the kids in the car because we were headed to like soccer practice for one of the older ones that was little at that time. And everybody's hungry, right? This was a time of life where we were literally going nonstop. And I kind of had nothing else to do really because we were building a couple of different companies. So my husband at the time, he worked from like 6 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the morning. So he was never around. So I just filled up our schedule. I was teaching CCD at our Catholic church. I had the kids all in classes, all this kind of stuff. So we're going to soccer. And this was one of the nights where I'm like, don't really have dinner plans. So we're just going to stop and get something. So we had stopped at McDonald's or whatever, and the kids all wanted that. And I'm doing the mommy thing. I'm driving and I've got a burger and I'm going like this, trying to give it to the kid behind me. And the speed had changed from 35 or from 45 to 35. And I was going 52 in a 45, which now all of a sudden I'm doing 52 in a 35. And she got me. And I've never had the nice cop. I've never had the one that's like, I get it, just slow down. No. They're always like, well, you have precious cargo. If I hear you have precious cargo, like one more time, like I don't know that, like I am high on meth, tweaking, driving down the road. Like, no, I'm just doing a thing. Never have the nice. I never. One time I had my parents in the car. I had a bunch of car seats in the back of the car and we were at the beach. We were at Pawleys Island, which is north of Charleston. It's in South Carolina. So it's north of Charleston and just south of Myrtle Beach, Pawleys Island. And we were going somewhere like to some antique store or something because we were entertaining my parents. And I had gone one street too far. So I did the, flip the bitch move where you're flipping it around because there was a side street. So I'm like, okay, there's enough room. I'm just going to flip it around. I misjudged by just a couple inches. So now I'm like half flipped and I got to back up to go forward. And there was a cop right there and he pulled me over.
Why is it they're always there when we get pulled over? You know what I mean? It's like they totally miss the guy that's driving, trafficking drugs with the hooker strapped to the hood of the car.
Right.
Go driving backwards 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, but they get me. You know what I mean? It's like, okay. They miss that guy, but I don't know. I know it's a hard job. I wouldn't want it, but man, seems like I always get nailed, always. But I haven't gotten to 2 years. Knock on wood.
I know, me too. My insurance is nice and low right now, and I'm like, that's where I need to keep it because we just got 2 people off of our insurance. We're about to put another person on our insurance, and then the boys come on the insurance. So I'm like, no more tickets. No more tickets. But anyway.
People wonder why, like, as we get older, like, with all the brushes with the law and the injuries, why we know so much about pharmaceuticals. And of course, I'm in the right business. I have to, I know all about these companies because, well, I've had to take the pain medicine.
Yeah, exactly. The Oscars. You watching it or not watching it?
Probably not. I don't even know who's nominated this year.
Yeah. I don't know who's nominated this year either, except for there was a movie we were talking in the green room about, the religious one. What is it called?
The Jesus Revolution.
The Jesus Revolution. That's right. I think is that one. No, that wouldn't be nominated because it just came out this year, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. The only thing I had heard was Top Gun. There was, I believe, and I might be wrong, but I believe it was an NBC commentator host that said that he hopes that doesn't get nominated. It just gets totally ignored because it shines a positive light on the military. And it's like, what crazy thinking we have here in the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
how could I don't know. That's just against my fiber. I don't see how you can be against people that are fighting for good. They're fighting to keep you free. They're fighting to keep you safe. I don't get
Well,
it.
the only reason I might watch it tonight, but it's going to happen. But if the Chris Rock comedy special got nominated, if we had to hear about that this year, that would be funny. But
That's going to be the elephant in the room, don't you think?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I know Chris Rock won't be there. But the other guy is the host tonight, the late night guy. I forgot his name, but
It's not Jimmy Kimmel. It's
I thought it was.
is it Jimmy Kimmel? I thought it was Jimmy Fallon. I think you're right. I think it is Jimmy Kimmel. And I don't know. I
Well, it's not a big.
mention it.
Yeah, I'm just not a big fan of his. I can read about what movies won tomorrow, but I know what movies I like, so not going to matter.
Yeah, honestly, I completely forgot about the Oscars because my LA booking agent, I was going to do some shows tonight, and he's like, yeah, I can't really get anybody turned on to coming on to the show tonight because of the Oscars. Everybody's either doing a viewing party or they're actually going. And I'm like, yeah, that's right, I forgot. And then, oh my gosh, do you have the Nextdoor app to keep you connected with your other neighbors?
No.
Okay. Real quick, and then we'll get on to the financial stuff that's going on, which is pretty major. So we have the Nextdoor app, and it works really great in urban areas because it connects nearby. So you can pick your radius of like 5 miles, 10 miles, 25 miles. And I usually keep it pretty close, so like the 5-mile range. And that encompasses quite a bit of neighborhoods around me. And if somebody breaks into their house, like there was this one older lady, she said, usually I lock my doors, but I guess I didn't lock my doors last night because I woke up, came downstairs to my kitchen this morning, and there was a man sitting at my kitchen table drinking a cup of coffee. And I said to him, you need to leave right now. And he looked at me bewildered and like odd, and then all of a sudden kind of stumbled out. And she's like, maybe it was one of my other neighbors that were drunk and they went to the wrong house. And I'm like, you're okay with that? I'm not okay with that. What? You woke up to a stranger sitting in your kitchen and you're like, oh, whatever. So anyway,
That's when you got to put bars up on your windows, like the family in the Nightmare on Elm Street.
I know. I'm like, I would have called the alarm company and had somebody come out there to do something to my house like the next day. I would have been so freaked out. Anyway, somebody had posted saying something about daylight savings time. And I typed back and I'm like, oh, no, they got rid of that. Because I had read some kind of article before the holidays saying that this was going to be the last time that we changed the clocks. And that was in October of last year. And I'm like, yes, great. I don't want to change these clocks. And he's like, no, they thought maybe to do that, but it's not in place yet. I don't know if I dreamed it. That could have been something coming out of a surgery.
Well, they've talked about it before, but it's like, yeah, it has to be an act of Congress, quite literally.
I wish they would get rid of it because it just drives me crazy. And from what I understand, the reason for daylight savings time, and this is only from like the Lizipedia, like this is not actual truth that I could look up and find out. My understanding is that it was really for farmers to be able to get to their livestock earlier when the daytime shifts between darkness and light. So in spring, we spring forward so that they would have light earlier in the morning. And in fall, you fall back so that you have, again, light. And then I had heard it was about school children going to a school bus. That the same type of theory is that the early morning would be bright when they would have to go out to the school bus. And now like that's just completely out of whack because my high schooler has to get onto that bus at 6:10 in the morning. It is not light at 6:10 in the morning.
No, that should be illegal to have to be up that early.
I know. All right. So tell me, what is going on with SVB, Silicon Valley Bank?
Yeah, it's a crazy week. a few months back, we talked about, like, we were doing these, investing 101 things, and we talked about Black Swan events.
Mm-hmm.
Those events that come out of nowhere that happen, that roil the market, and you try to use those as opportunities, buying opportunities. And this is a perfect example, because who knew that the Silicon Valley Bank was in trouble until the last minute? And Friday, the feds took it over, and it had already lost like 48% of its trading value that morning in the pre-market, and when it opened up on Friday. And so this bank now, I guess, is insolvent. And you wonder, like, how does a bank become insolvent? And do they all have problems? So I guess you watch the news. None of the folks who watch the show here watch the news. I guess, I don't know if I know any more than anyone else, but I guess the problem with the bank is this is a very unique kind of bank. And you're going to hear a lot this week about this whole thing. Monday is going to be quite interesting. The bank was insolvent, so I guess they went back out to find people who would fund the bank, venture capitalists and other types of big money players. No one wanted to, and that tells you something. When nobody wants to, they've already, a lot of money from big tech and went in there to prop this bank up, and now that they don't want to spend the money on it, tells you a lot. So I think I texted you a chart. I don't know if you have it. I don't know if you can show it or not, but I texted you a chart of like what they owed and what they had and what they owed. And the bank made a terrible, terrible mistake. It was poorly managed. All right. So that's one thing. So kind of, I think a lot of people got scared and were standing outside to get their money at the bank. So it's a classic run on the bank on Friday. Now the banks will insure your money up to $250,000, but anything you put over that is, you just risk. It's uninsured. So they have upwards of over 150 billion with a B of uninsured money in that bank. So that's the problem. A lot of people put more money, and again, it's big tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they've put money in so that they could use that money like venture capital and give, I guess, loans to startup companies, venture cutting edge tech companies. And I hate to sound like a political, but a lot of woke companies, things that are like, they may be good 20 years down the road. They're just not feasible right now. They're what I call zombie companies.
Okay.
Those companies don't have the ability now to pay back, because those are the only companies who go to banks to get low interest loans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was okay when the Federal Reserve had rates at near zero for, all these years. Right. So, but now that they're raising rates, these companies they can barely afford to make their interest payments. So now at higher rates, they can't afford to even take loans. So you're going to see a lot of these zombie companies actually fall. They're going to collapse because they don't have the means to keep themselves up, except by low interest loans. People who want to take tremendous risk to do. And that was what that bank, I guess, sort of specialized in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a bank back in 2008, when everybody remembers this big banking collapse, out of that came what was called the Dodd-Frank rules that banks had to adhere to stay solvent and safe. As far as capitalization, they had to be liquid and have capital so that they don't fall. We don't have to worry about this too big to fail crap. Because when everybody got bailed out, it was working people that paid it. It wasn't the billionaire class. It was you and I, right? Still on the hook for all that debt, right? So this bank, I guess, when the Federal Reserve started talking about inflation, said it was transitory. Well, I guess the bank took their word for it, and they started buying short debt instruments like bonds. Like a lot of banks will buy bonds, and they keep it as like collateralized for loans. It's part of the banking process. Well, they bought these bonds that were barely paying anything because the interest rates are incredibly low. Well, here comes inflation. All right, so they have to start raising rates. This money doesn't have the capitalization to buy more bonds, from what I understand. Okay, now we'll learn a lot more about that this week. But so the bonds that they have, a lot of people don't think about this. If you buy a bond and you hold it to maturity, it's safe. You get your money back and your interest.
Mhm.
But in the interim, that bond that you think is safe can go up and down just like a stock. So if you need out of it any given time, you have to sell it at whatever the market value is. Now you have bonds with almost zero coupon rates because they're so low. You don't have the capital to go out and buy more at higher rates to offset your balance, make your balance sheet better. And all of a sudden, these bonds that they hold, they're like cut in half. They're like worth 50% of what they used to be. Herein lies the problem. Now, I don't know. I don't have the person's name, but you remember Lehman Brothers is one of those companies that collapsed because they mismanaged their risk so badly.
Mhm.
And it's an iconic company you never thought would ever fail, but yet they did. Well, one of the big officers at Lehman actually was one of the big officers at this bank. Now, he wasn't there when it collapsed, but he had been there, before. So perhaps some of those bad decisions are made again under that. So how does this? So I guess the question we have to answer, and this everybody's going to have to think about this. If they don't bail the bank out, we're starting to see like when you crank rates up so fast that it creates cracks in the system. And this was a big crack, and this is one that they didn't anticipate, and this bank was poorly managed. So do you just let it fail? And those people who have money in there that's over 250 lose their money? Now we're talking about these big companies, and we're talking about the billionaire class. We're talking about big tech corporations that had money in there. Do you just let them take their losses? Or do you prop it up so people like, okay, the FDIC and the Treasury's on it, so we don't have to worry about any of our banks? Because there may be some people think about their bank next week. They look at the stock and it dropped 20% Friday. They're like, oh, is this bank in the same kind of trouble? I'm going to go get my money out. You don't want to run on banks.
Right.
But if poorly managed bank, do you really want to keep it up at taxpayer expense? And do you really want to bail out the billionaire class? Because it's those people who lost all that money that's going to get paid back. Not people like you and I. We didn't lose any money.
Mhm.
We make those bad decisions. I mean, my bank's a small community bank. They're not making loans to venture capital companies. They're not making loans to those venture capital funds and risky tech companies or environmental companies that that are more interested in ESG than they are in the bottom line.
Mhm.
Because that's sort of the going thing. If you want subsidies or whatever, or you want preference from somewhere like BlackRock, then you have to go woke and be more involved about the environmental concerns and all the different politically correct concerns that take precedent over the bottom line of a company.
Mhm.
Put your shareholders first and not your personal politics. And so that's where I stand on that issue. I don't like this whole ESG. I think it's just crap. It's a good way to take a good company and make it a mediocre company in a hurry. And that to me is corporate socialism. And we don't want that. I want excellence in the companies,
Mhm. Absolutely.
That's basically what's happened. So we're gonna have to ask ourselves, and you'll see people on Twitter, and I'm not gonna name any names because I don't want to get sued by some billionaire raider who is a venture capitalist. And one in particular has been on Twitter like, this is horrible. If the Treasury and this administration does not step in right now, we're going to have chaos and catastrophe, and it's going to be Armageddon on Wall Street and all this stuff. Well, we'll see some blowback from it. But when you start questioning this guy, and he says, well, I don't have any skin in this game. It's like only 10% of my portfolio is in that venture and capital and that aggressive stuff. Okay, so 10% of this guy's portfolio is roughly 350 million. Yeah,
Mm.
he's in the game. Don't tell me he's not going to miss 350 million.
Right.
So he's using Twitter to gin up scare, fright,
Mhm.
fear. Just fear porn is what I call it. You can get people to do anything by scaring people to death, but people need to be concerned because how many regional banks actually had exposure to some of these things? So
Mhm.
we're going to get out in a hurry.
So I have a question about people thinking that they need to withdraw their money versus the FDIC insurance of up to $250,000. So there are some I think it's confusion, really. Some people believe that, okay, yes, you're insured up to $250,000, but you can practically only get $100,000. Is there anything out there that contradicts what the FDIC does insure?
No, I think they insure up to 250, so that amount is insured. Now there's tranches, I think, of time frame when they pay you back.
Uh,
So if you get I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up, but maybe you get 100,000 up front, and then I guess as they pay out and they let prioritize their payouts. That's a big deal though. I mean, because when a bank goes kaput like that, and there's a lot of people to pay out. Now they were trying to sell the assets, like sell the bank,
mm-hmm.
and you would think like, well, who would step in and buy this bank? No, there's plenty of money out there to buy this bank. Okay, so it's not like there's a lack of money.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lack of will. First thing I thought of, first company I thought of was with Bank of America, because they bought up Merrill Lynch when Merrill was struggling during 2008. So Bank of America and Merrill Lynch are now the same. But, Bank of America is too conservative to go out and buy a bank that gives out those kinds of loans and works, with that kind of debt. Citigroup wouldn't. And JP Morgan sure isn't going to. So I was thinking Wells Fargo wouldn't. They're too conservative. So who's left? Really nobody. All these big pooled venture capital funds could, easily step in there and buy. But I guess at some point they're like, no, we're just throwing money away at this point.
Right.
So all zombie companies that were working on that had loans through there, it wouldn't surprise me if a third of them or half of them went out of business in the next few months.
So, I do have a comment here, and I want to go ahead and read it because it's actually through a private text message, but it's in the light of short selling stocks. So from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, so short selling involves rooting against an individual company, essentially, or the market. And some investors may be opposed to that on the principle. However, if you have a firm conviction that a stock price is heading lower, then the shorting can be a profitable way to act on that instinct, so long as you're aware of the risk. But this is what this person said. Goldman issued a list of 5 banks that they're seeing huge short sales of their shares. 2 of the biggest banks are Truist and KeyBank. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Those are some what I call regional banks.
Mm-hmm.
They might have had more exposure to those types of loans, to those types of companies. So we'll again, when the rates get cranked up. Now, I remember when they started raising rates and we started talking about how high inflation was. Do you remember there's at one point I said, I wish the Fed would just do 2% off the bat. Boom. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest move in history, probably. It would scare all the nervous money out of the market immediately. And we would take the pain and have invited in the room, have a cup of coffee with it, and get on our way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they did all these incremental things saying, well, it's just transitory. We think it's still transitory. And then it wasn't. And so that's that. In hindsight, that might have not that. I mean, they operate on more information, so they're 10 times smarter than me on all this. But it seems like in hindsight, something like that might have been. There were some people out on the periphery that were calling for that, and that I thought made sense.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like now in hindsight, that might have scared a lot of that VC money, things that like this bank is dealing with. Now, keep in mind, if you look at Friday's close on some of these banks, they've dropped anywhere from 15 to 20% in a day. That's a bad year.
Yeah.
Much less. Now, if you're going to short sell, you do have to be very aware of the risks. So if the price of stock is at $10 and you short 100 shares, you're selling shares you don't own. So if it goes down, and which you think it will, you can buy to cover. So if it goes down to $5 and you buy at $5 a share, 100 shares, well, you just made $500 by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, it's already dropped 20%. So Tuesday, if we get a good inflation number, for example, this week, the inflation number comes in And I'm not saying people cook the books or cook the numbers, but it wouldn't surprise me to see a favorable inflation number to come in so that they don't have to raise, takes that 50 basis points off the table and back to 25 or maybe nothing to let the market cool off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that they cook the numbers, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was a softer, considering last time coming higher, the jobs numbers and so forth. It would shock me a little bit, but it wouldn't surprise me. But definitely know the risks. If a stock has already dropped 20%, keep in mind, come Monday morning, if it drops a little bit more, there may be money out there on the sidelines, like, okay, Key Bank or whatever bank you mentioned, Truist or whatever, they don't have the exposure we were afraid they had, and then money jumps into the stock to buy it, and it goes up 20%. Well, you got to buy the cover, so it's 20% higher than you thought it was going to be.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you got to be wary of those types of things. A lot of people really get caught up in that. Like a lot of people that hated Tesla, that's still heavily shorted, and they bought or they sold a ton of Tesla, and then Tesla goes up $200 or $300 later, and they're still holding short positions, and they have to keep putting cash in their brokerage accounts to cover all that margin. It's like, how long are you going to fight that? You know what I mean? It's like at some point you got to buy to cover, and then those people that shorted, when they buy, they just run the price up higher.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I've got to say Tesla has built a very solid model, and it's quite interesting exactly what it does. So the vehicle's all torque because there isn't a combustion engine in it. So when you push that pedal just a little bit, it's like having a super souped up golf cart. Because it'll throw your head back. It goes. So now you have a updated, all the creature comforts, high-tech, zippy car that I'm driving my Tesla and I see like Corvette and I'm like, I got you. I'm like, I got you. I mean, when you're driving something that goes 0 to 80 in 3.5 seconds, I mean, it's really a very fast car. So that's just a little props up to Tesla. I've really enjoyed it, and they made a good product. But I do have a question here. So it seems like trying to navigate the market, trying to figure out, okay, so if I'm going to look into banks that I'm going to either bank with or invest, my money into their stock, it's so hard because I just went online and I typed in, and this is not a promotion towards any of these companies or anything like that, but I typed in the banks that are doing the best, the top 10 banks. It has Truist Bank in there, which Truist Bank is also being reported as the stocks are being short sold. So
it could be something that's just the rationale of like, this bank has done so well, all banks are going to get caught up in this, so I'm going to short sell the one who's rallied the most because they probably have a little further to fall. Now that may or may not work out in reality, but that's probably the mentality behind that. I haven't paid much attention to banks in a long time, really, because, well, at 0% interest rate and with some of the Dodd-Frank rules, they have limits on what they can even invest in. So it kind of put a cap on some of their profits. And if some of them have a dividend yield, that's good, but they're nothing sexy, right? They're not, I can find bigger dividend yields in other places that don't have sort of the chains on, so to speak.
Sure.
But this is an example of a company that was just kind of still reckless. It doesn't matter, I don't think, what Congress passes as far as laws. If we had another sort of pseudo 2008 type issue and they pass all these regulatory reforms, some bank eventually, it always comes back around. Some bank is going to stretch the limits, and there's too few regulators there keeping an eye on too many banks. And, some of these risks, we just now hear about it in the news because it's not something anybody follows. And you probably wouldn't know it there if you were an insider. But apparently leading up to this for a few weeks, insiders at the company have been selling heavily their stock in that bank.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do they know? I would love to find that out. Or was it just routine sales because they don't want to be, heavily into one company? Maybe they're just diversifying. I don't know. It could be something that simple, but it certainly makes you raise an eyebrow.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they get out early when everybody else is standing in line waiting on their money?
Right.
So, but yeah, just as far back to the short thing, you just definitely want to be careful about that, because a lot of people learn tough lessons with Tesla about covering shorts. And I'm not sure what kind of brokerage account you have, but you do have to have it marginable. So if you don't have a margin account, you need to apply for margin before you can short sell.
Interesting. So let's go back to the rates, the Fed's raising rates. I was doing a quick search to see, are we at a stopping point? There are a few articles saying that they believe possibly this is the last rate we'll see in 2023, and then it'll just stay where it is. So it's currently at 4.75%. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
4 quarters to 5. Yeah.
Okay. So Forbes, however, is reporting that they believe that it will find its stop in 2023. My comment's coming up. Here we go. So Forbes literally is saying, what is the rate decision for 2023? The economic projections with the Fed's March decision will provide an update on where the Fed see rates heading in 2023. It's likely rates will peak somewhere in the 5 to 6% range, but projections may help clarify exactly where. And that was put out March 4th, 2023. Do you really see it going up to 6%?
Well, it's funny how last week we were talking about that 50% rate hike this time because of the hot inflation number that came out before, higher than expected, even though it's still in the cooling off trend. To now where we're talking, well, they even raise a quarter point, So what does the market say? Well, of course, now the stock market's been all that we had last Friday just kind of went away last week, right? So those big rallies, and in the course of a week, I don't take a whole lot in the course of a week. I think for folks over the next week, though, I would just kind of sit and watch. If you have money on the sidelines, maybe in the next couple of weeks, get your toe wet a little bit. Maybe go in a little bit and see where it's at. So I wouldn't really suggest anybody. Just keep your cash on hand and ready, but not. Don't go looking to buy tomorrow. But as far as where rates are going, I don't really look so much at the stock market, but I do look at we talked about that 2-year and 10-year yield, how it's inverted.
Mm-hmm.
And it got over a point apart,
Mm-hmm.
right? Full point. Well, the 2-year yield is, that's your risk off yield, right? So it should be more in line with what the rate is, right? The 4.75 to 5. Well, the rate got over 5%, right? So it showed, the Fed is likely to raise rates. It went a little over 5. And then we thought, well, maybe they'll do 50 basis points because of that inflation number. Well, the bond market, the yields in the 2-year moved drastically. This is the fastest I've seen a yield drop in, I can't remember. But it went from over 5 to like 4.62 in 2 days, or like really 1 day almost. I mean, it dropped back below 5. But then it was still like 4.9 or something like that. And then it went down to 4.62. Now that's indicating like, hey, wait a minute. They're not just going to not raise, but they're indicating a possible cut. That's where the treasury, the yields are going. So it's out of whack if they're raising rates, and the 2 years down here at 4.62.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that and I'm like, well, that's pretty drastic. Actually, I called a buddy of mine that still works in my old firm, Fidelity. I'm like, are you watching the bond yields? And he never really pays attention to bonds, but he noticed it that day and he's like, yeah, that's a big drop. So that is, does that indicate what the Fed will do? I don't know. Jerome Powell's going to do what the Fed's going to do. But the bond market sure is not ready for it. They don't want a rate hike. Now they'll drift back up if they do raise rates. But a lot of nervous money went into 2 years. Enough of it piled into 2-year treasuries that it drove the yield down that much. So now that yield curve is not as steep as it was. That inverted yield curve is not as steep as it was.
And so if they went backwards, so if we're sitting at 4.75 for federal rate where the increase happened this past week, and it goes back to 4.5. Man,
Yeah.
the market's going to rally, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it would. But if they get another hot inflation number and they're cutting rates into a high inflation number, well, that's not their mandate. They have to keep inflation in check. So they would have to raise. But yeah, if I think at some point, if they notice that there's not contagion in some of these these regional banks that we're talking about with what happened with SVB, and that's sort of a one-off, and we don't have, because you'll never know if you're in another 2008 scenario until you're in a 2008 scenario. They're not that transparent, right? So it's just all of a sudden, oops, one day we need capital and we don't have it. Treasury, can you help us out? And that's one reason why, like, the banks just haven't had the upside. That's one reason I haven't paid attention to them. There's a couple of regional banks, and I'll not name them, but I've bought for people in the past, but only because they were, certain banks that I happen to sort of like, and not because the dividend was spectacular. I just thought that they were way undervalued. And, if you're going to, this is a kind of market, we talk about the difference between investing and trading. Investing in stocks and trading in stocks, two totally different things. If you're long-term and you're investing and times are tumultuous and you want to put capital to work, that's awesome. You got a long time to go, right? So you're going to be very successful. If you're trading stocks based on where you think the short term is going to go, man, you just don't know what to do in times like this. So I have a rule of thumb for people to keep in mind. If you buy a stock, you're not married to it. Don't get greedy. Don't expect it to go up way too much. If you're up 20% on a stock in a short term, take your money and walk. Or at least sell that 20% gain that you've got and put it somewhere else and something more stable or more long term. That way you're not losing your gains. Or sell what you initially put in and leave your 20% in there to ride. So you lose your initial investment. If you see a stock on the downside, now again, if you're long term, you don't worry about the fluctuations, because there's stocks I like that are down 50% year to date, over the last year, that I still like for long term. But if you're trading in a short term market and you're down 10%, go find a different table to play at. Just be cautious with your money.
Speaking about being cautious with your money, and in light of everything that's going on with banks, so for the layman person that isn't a financial person, they don't watch the stock market, they don't know a lot about investing, and it's just like, oh, banks are in trouble, I should go get my money out of them. Do you think we're going to see a lot of people making withdrawals out of their bank accounts?
No, I don't think so. I mean, even back in 2008, you didn't see a huge run on the banks. The people who ran on the banks are all the billionaires. They're afraid they weren't going to get their money back if the government didn't bail them out. It seems like that's the class that always gets bailed out, not you and I. So we have to ask ourselves again, if we find, as a society, are we willing to let something fail? We went that whole too big to fail before, and here we are back at a company that might, that could potentially start a domino effect of some banks. Who knows? Who knows who else is that stupidly reckless, but I didn't like the bailouts before, just out of principle. If something, and a lot of people think, oh, you can't see all the collapse. Well, if you're you need to, I guess the way I think about it is, like, as an economist, I want to put money deployed to where it's best utilized. And if I'm in mediocre companies and I'm propping them up, especially in the tech business or in the pharma business or research for medical things and diseases and things like that, if I'm putting money into zombie companies to prop them up and they're mediocre at best, why am I putting all that capital deployed when I could let them fail and maybe have another company that's better at what they're doing, sharper, smarter, more savvy? Why am I not funding those? And the only way you're going to get to funding those are letting those zombie companies fall.
Mm.
And I hate to say it, but sometimes a bank like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns that get so arrogant and ahead of themselves, sometimes they have to fall.
Interesting.
Because how else are you going to find a better place to put your capital when you're too busy putting it in some place that's just wasting your money? And you don't, but it's hard to do because you don't know what's happening on the other side. How long is it going to take for another company to step up and take its place or whatever? You just don't know. And that's the fear of not knowing. But you have to trust in a capitalistic system that money is going to find its most efficient place to work. And have something like an SVB that found all kinds of places for it to work. And it was great when rates were zero. Everybody was just having a great time and the party didn't stop. But when rates go up and they have a little bit of, they don't have the wiggle room, like they had no wiggle room at zero. Now they have zero wiggle room and they never planned for it. Rates don't stay at zero forever. And did the Fed cause a lot of this by keeping rates at zero?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't do that. You can't give away free money forever.
Right.
But just because that's the cause of it doesn't mean that folks like you and I have to pay for it. And
I have a question on that. And this is a no knowledge type question, so it could be kind of stupid. But for those banks that we had mentioned earlier in the show, that are in that Black Swan event, so SVB Bank, right? Obviously we have been talking about bailouts. So there could be a bailout that comes around to try to help them. What about selling off client files before you get to somebody like, let's say, a Wells Fargo or something that buys them as a subsidiary or just absorbs them? Is there ever a point in time to where they can sell client files and other banks can be like, yeah, I'm interested in this, this, and this?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, it sort of happened that way in 2008 because the government started. Remember that term called TARP?
TARP? No, I don't.
They had this big TARP fund where the Treasury bought troubled assets, so they would hold them on their books, so other companies wouldn't have to if they come in and bought it. So when somebody comes in and buys the assets of Lehman Brothers or Bear Stearns, they weren't buying all those troubled assets. It was troubled asset relief program. So the Treasury took all the risk. The government took all the risk. They held it for that long. So the other companies didn't have to. So that very well may be selling off some of the riskier stuff. The government takes control of it. Treasury takes control of it, puts it on their books, and then whatever's left can be sold.
Very interesting.
So an option.
I pulled up the definition for anybody that's never heard of that before. The Troubled Asset Relief Program is a program of the United States government to purchase toxic assets and equity from financial institutions to strengthen its financial sector that was passed by Congress and signed into law by President George W. Bush. Interesting.
That was his last thing before Obama took office. And everybody, I guess the fear was going around big then too, and that was pretty rough. But they basically walked into George Bush's office. He said, "Hey, listen, if we don't do this, we're going to have Great Depression number 2." Now, would we have? I don't know. But I didn't like the bailouts then because why would you have inefficient money working again for another decade at 0% interest rates and have another problem?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and maybe it's a small problem this time, and maybe all those rules did work and to some degree, but there's always going to be an issue. There's always going to be a Black Swan event. It's like, well, how did they get away with that? Well, how did Bernie Madoff get away with it? It's people get to sleep at the wheel and they don't pay attention. But yeah, that's an option that could happen, and probably would be the more likely thing to happen. But even though I sort of disagree with it.
Very interesting. So for the person out there that's saying, gosh, you know what, I've been on E-Trade and I've been trying to trade things around on my own. I really want to stay in the stock market, but I don't feel comfortable anymore doing it on my own. What would you tell somebody in this market today of how you can help them?
Well, first thing I'd want to talk to them about is, are you looking just for general counsel and advice, discussions to maybe help you formulate a strategy that you want to work on your own? or is this something where you just want to step away from it and have a strategy and let someone else work it for you? So that's the question. How much time do you want to spend on doing this? Because it's tough. I mean, the things move fast. And if you're trading in times like this, I would ask, do you want to be a trader or do you want to be an investor? If you want to be a trader, then, I'll be glad to have a chat with you about strategy but then if you want to be an investor and we need to talk long term, we need to stop talking like in and out of the market all the time.
Sure.
It's so that I just want to see where that person's coming from. And if that's something that you're interested in, obviously my firm, me, would be glad to help people invest for the long term and make those decisions. And we're discretionary. We take discretionary authority. So we're comfortable with your strategy. We pick up securities on your behalf and we trade those for you or invest those for you and buy and sell when we deem necessary, whether it's individual stocks, mutual funds, bonds, whatever.
And do you feel comfortable telling everybody how your fee structure is?
Absolutely. You always see that commercial on TV. It's like, well, when you do better, we do better. Well, I'm the same way. So my fee structure is based on how much you have under management. Now, a lot of those companies that do that fee structure that way, you have to have about 500,000 to get started with them. I don't care where you start. I'm concerned where you finish. That's what I tell people. So don't worry about where you're starting. Point is, just get started. So based on assets under management, for example, if you had a $100,000 portfolio, I would, now, for example, just for easy math, I charge 1% of assets under management. Well, if those assets stay the same, that's 1% a year of that. But if it grows to say 120,000, well, that's awesome. I still get 1% of that, but 1% of 120,000 is better than 1% of 100,000. If your value in the time that we're investing drops to 90 or 80, we're still working our strategy. I have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that I'm working in your best interest, not for a fee. So if it drops down to 80, then I get that 1% of whatever that is. And but it's an annual rate, and I bill it quarterly, so you don't pay it all at one time. And I like to get paid more than once a year, so I have bills to pay too. So, but that's how the fee works. If you do better, it's a flat percentage of whatever the assets are under management, and it's a tiered level, and it's in our contract. So at the low end, it would be if you're over, I think, where's it? I have to go back and look at the contract now. But it's like if it's over 250 or 500, then it's 0.8. If it's in the $250,000 range, it's like a 1%. And then if it's smaller amounts, it's up to like 1.25 or something like that. But what I did is actually, when we set up our fee schedule, we did some research on what the average fees were, and I tried to like discount that just a little bit because I never really wanted to have a discussion with somebody about fees. I don't want that. It's not about fees. It's about where you're going and things like that. So I never really wanted that to come up. And because you have to sort of be careful. Some people have different like wrap fee programs and things like that they'll do in their types of management styles. So yeah, you got to be cognizant of your fees. And that's another thing to keep in mind. If you have an advisor and all they're doing for you is mutual funds, well, those mutual funds have expense ratios in there too. So you're paying a fee for every one of those. So I try to make sure that whatever investments I put people in, whether it's individual stock and occasionally mutual funds, if it's appropriate, that I'm very cautious about how much and other fees that are in there. Because I don't want anybody paying more than they have, And fees eats away at the return of a portfolio. Now, if you own an individual stock, there's no fee. There's no expense ratio or anything in that. If you own a mutual fund and you buy one that's, really expensive, you have a 2% management fee inside that fund and then toss 1% on me. It's like, well, why would I do that? It's like,
right.
That's the way. So I try to find those that are highly rated, long-term success, and then as low a fee as I can get and balance that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us and being on the show. We've had a nice, hearty show. We talked about a little bit of everything, and I love doing this with you. Let's do it again very, very soon.
Yeah, and folks, like I said this week, just if you want to put money back to work in, if you have money on the sidelines, I'd probably wait 3 or 4 days, see where things are going, see what the news is, let things cool off. We have an inflation number coming out Tuesday, so it'll be a big day. And then, of course, we're going to hear nothing except banks all day tomorrow. So, but in the meantime, when you hear noise of people tweeting about, I'll do this, or it's chaos or Armageddon, tune that noise out, because a lot of people have vested interest in what they're saying and certain outcomes. So let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'd have to say tomorrow morning is one of those mornings where I'm only going to look up to really see what's going on in the news, maybe once or twice. I've got to say, with the trial that just passed, I did not really want to hear about that. It's like you said, you're the one that woke me up to realize the term that is coined and used all the time: if it bleeds, it leads. And you said that like last year, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I said it to a family member, and they're like, yeah, have you never heard that before? So, but it is tiresome to hear if it bleeds, it leads. And I think this is one of those things where it is a financial bleed. So they're going to be leading with it tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be an interesting news day. I'll be watching. So
yeah,
but it'll be an interesting day. So, yeah, if we have like a huge, crazy drop in the market, I might, wait till Tuesday, Wednesday, and then start maybe whoever has some cash available, put a little bit in. That'd be good. But we'll see. We'll see. Sometimes patience is a virtue, even though I wasn't born with much. Obviously, I'm not patient enough to let the ball bounce before I go leaping for it on the concrete ground. So
I was born with a negative amount of patience, and life has beaten me into submission. That's pretty much where I am right now.
But anyway, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk about this, because I know it's a scary thing, and a lot of people are saying, "Hey, should I go get my money on Monday?" No, yeah. I wouldn't. I mean, if you have over 250,000 in one account, you might want to consider, making sure your money's insured. But a lot of those people that had a lot of money in that bank were huge investors, and the rest of us that don't make, that aren't worth 20 billion shouldn't have to pay for their dumb mistakes.
I agree.
My opinion. Just my opinion.
I agree with you. All right, JC, let's do this again soon.
All right. You have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. You too. Bye now. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in and being active with the show. I really, really appreciate it. You love us, and we love you 10 times more. Let me tell you, as always, everybody, we are blessed. You are blessed. I love you. And I did promise a little St. Patrick's Day swag special. We're still going to do that. I was a little bit more incapacitated than I realized I was going to be. And we did advertise it, and I did miss that date. This is the first time ever. I've got so much Catholic guilt over it, let me tell you. But we're going to do something really, really special. So stay tuned. I'm going to do a quick announcement, and then we're going to go on. And it might even be St. Patrick's Day. I'm really decorated out this year, and the kids are like, what is up with mom? But I love it, and I miss Ireland so very much. So if you have a funny limerick or an Irish story or something you would like to share, please let me know. Even pictures, share them at ecooperstudios.com. ECOOPERstudios@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, everybody, have a wonderful, blessed Sunday, and I will see you again soon. Mwah. Bye now.